Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
You're listening to Tony Graham on Binjang 91.5, and it's time for our talk with Matthew Dickerson about the November Standing Committee meetings. So how are you going today, Matthew?
Yeah, good, thanks, Tony. And obviously we have had the November Standing Committee meetings, but I'm sure if you've got any questions that relate to Wellington, then don't feel that you're limited to those Standing Committee meetings, which I'm sure you won't anyway.
Well, actually, there was a couple of things. The first one, actually, I didn't mention to you, but I am interested in the report of the Public Spaces Tree Committee, because I do believe, from my own perspective at least, that, and also all the facts say that it's really important to have good tree plantings in towns to keep those towns cool, and from environmental reasons, and also just from the amenity point of view. I'm really interested to see if there's any plan in place yet, some sort of coordinated plan to develop that space out better.
You're absolutely right, Tony. It is important and it does give you a whole range of environmental benefits, so it is an important part of council going forward. One of the things that council's been doing for a number of years is trying to increase that tree canopy, just trying to increase that in the urban areas, both obviously Wellington and Dubbo urban areas, to try and increase that. And it has been increasing. It's been going up from around about 15, 16% a few years ago, up to around about 18, 19% now. So that's going up slowly, but it's slowly getting there. And that's our objective, is to keep increasing that. And part of the reason that Tree Committee exists is really to involve the community. So there's a number of community members there, some of our staff, and we've got some councillors on that. Councillor Jess Goff is the chairperson of that particular committee. And the first meeting we had, which was the first meeting we had recently, which was then come through to the Standing Committee meetings, really was just about a bit of a discussion around the people around the table, why they were there, what some of their objectives were, and then just to look at a couple of the changes that are occurring there. And unfortunately, some of those changes that are occurring do involve removing some trees but replacing them with more trees. One of the things that we do see in some of those street trees is that some of them have been there for a long period of time. Those roots obviously get down and across various parts of infrastructure, and they can start to lift the road or do damage to pipes under the ground. So unfortunately, we do need to remove some of those trees at times, but in a few of the things we looked at in that first committee meeting, for example, we looked at removing some trees, and there was one street from memory that had 9 trees removed but were replaced with 11 trees. Now, obviously, initially when those trees are put in, they won't have the same canopy cover as those ones that are being removed, because the ones being removed are more mature, but they will eventually grow and get that greater coverage. But also, the modern way, the Stockholm method is the modern way that we plant trees now, and the Stockholm method tries to keep those roots away from doing damage to the pavement, the road pavement, and tries to protect some of those pipes and also aid some of the drainage. So we've developed better methods of planting trees over the years, without a doubt, and so we'll keep doing that. But it is good to have that committee just to keep us in check from a community perspective and communicate with the community what's occurring.
Yeah, and I might add that it's not easy getting this thing right with trees in these public spaces, with the infrastructure around it, from the point of view of long-term maintenance and the longevity of those trees, as well as arriving at the right kind of amenity for the area that they might be in. The other thing about that too is direction for the community as to what is suitable to be planting in their area, not just from the streetscape point of view, but also in their own space and out on the footpaths where they often will plant trees on council space. I know they're not supposed to do that, but that happens. And it's a good thing that the public wants to plant trees too, of course. So if they're going to do that, they need some sort of plan or direction as to what they should and shouldn't do, if that's going to be allowed to happen.
And it's more about some of the trees they might plant on their property. Obviously, no, they shouldn't be planting trees out on the footpath, but planting trees on their own property that may be complementary to some of the trees that are out the front. And we do actually get people who come along and ask council, some of our expert staff, for advice on the types of trees that they should be planting in their property, because even though they're planting it in their property, the roots decide to go wherever they decide to go. They don't always know where a boundary is, and they don't always know that they shouldn't be going across that boundary. So getting advice from our staff in terms of the types of trees people might plant on their properties makes sense, and it's a good idea. The other part I think that's important, Tony, is that you do sometimes see that natural conflict, as you say, between trees, and then you've got vehicles on roads. And I remember a few years ago along the highway, along the Golden Highway, actually no, it was along the Newell Highway, before it turned into the Golden Highway. And there were a number of street trees that used to be along that highway, and the state government, it was a highway, so they controlled it. They removed those trees there, and they copped some criticism from some members of the public. Now, in defence of the state government their argument was that those trees along the highway created a dangerous situation for cars travelling along there at reasonable speed, and there were multiple lanes of traffic there. They planted trees and they worked with council to plant trees in some other areas. It was the state government decision to remove those trees, but they worked with council to plant the same number of trees somewhere else. So the total loss of tree canopy wasn't there. There was no net loss. Yeah. But again, they argued that it was safer along that highway section not to have those trees along the side of the road. So I understand that as well, that you want to value that tree canopy, you want to value what it does for our urban environment, but you also don't want someone making a small mistake on a highway and ending up wrapped around a tree. So you're trying to balance all of that, and that's the challenge of being on council. There are so many different things that are pulling at you, so many different ideas and opinions pulling at you. You've got to come up with a decision that not always keeps everyone happy, but is the right decision from a whole range of different perspectives.
Yeah, these things do come into it, and they're very important things that you raise, and that's why I think a roadmap for the public would be a good idea, and get them involved in and take ownership of tree planting. I think that ought to be looked at. What's your opinion about that?
That's exactly what the Public Spaces Tree Committee is all about. We actually put out expressions of interest for people to join that committee. We had a number of applications, which was great. I love to see the community involved. I love to see the community wanting to be involved in that consultation process, and I think this council is very good at that consultation process. Just the number of committees that we reformed that were disbanded during the last council, I think that is a clear indication that this council is very keen to see that consultation. And in this scenario, it's a perfect example of that, where we want people on that committee seeing where we're going, seeing that roadmap, and getting the information directly from our staff who are out there doing it on the ground.
Yes, okay. Well, of course, the one little issue that doesn't go away and has been around for a long time is the situation in Cameron Park with both the fence around the playground and also the complete and utter inadequacy of the toilet block that was supposed to be replaced like for like when it came to the standard and wasn't. There's been a lot of agitation over a long period of time in this area about that, which leads me into the next part is you've had a report on Wiradjuri tourism from the project committee, where you've had a meeting. Things like that, if you're trying to promote Wiradjuri tourism in Wellington, it's pretty much of a waste of space when a bus can't pull up in front of Cameron Park, where we actually do offer something in that area. So what's happening in this space now? Is there some sort of will at all to move something forward to get this into the budget and get the problem fixed once and for all? It's been lingering around for a long time now.
I've got good news and bad news for you, Tony. So I'll give you the good news first. The fence around the playground area in Cameron Park is in our budget for this year, so it will be completed this year. I can't tell you the exact time frame. I'd have to go and look up the exact time frame, but it will be completed in this financial year. So that's budgeted for. That will be completed, and so we can tick that one off in, no more than 8 months' time. The bad news is in relation to the toilets, and I agree with you that the toilets that have been provided certainly were not a like-for-like replacement. And it's disappointing. I've heard from a number of members of the community in Wellington about the disappointment there, about the lack of toilets there. And the really frustrating part for me and for this group of councillors is that money was allocated for that toilet block that was in a previous budget. The previous council went ahead and put that new toilet block in there, which is, you would recognise, and I recognise as well, it is inadequate. Unfortunately, that money was spent on the inadequate toilets, and so there's no money in any budget in this financial year, definitely, to go and do anything with those toilets, to extend those, to add those, to build a new toilet block. Nothing in the budget whatsoever, and there is extreme pressure on our budget from a whole range of different angles, but in particular the roads at the moment, there's a lot of pressure on that budget. So we have no plans in this financial year to change that, and that will be something we'll have to analyse as we go through the budgetary process next year. I'm not making any promises about that at this stage. It's something we recognise, but it is difficult to work out where we might pull money from to go and spend money on something which, again, the frustrating part is, Tony, the money's been spent on that, but it was spent poorly. It was spent in a way that was not adequate for that particular area, and it needs to be addressed, but it's just a matter of finding that money to address that particular problem.
Yeah, look, I think everybody appreciates the fact that your new council, Matthew, got lumped with this problem, and now it's your unfortunate job to try and remedy that situation. And the public wants to see go forward on this somewhere along the line, and the will to do something about it. I think that's the signal they're looking for, I have to say. Anyway, getting on to the next subject, we were talking earlier about the situation at the low-level bridge, the Duke of Wellington Bridge, the low-level bridge across the Macquarie near the Bell there. Is there moves afoot to address the erosion issue there?
So that's a really interesting one. There is erosion that's obviously occurred as the Bell turned left into the Macquarie, and there was a reasonably substantial riverbank there at one stage in previous years. And there was a report that I have actually seen that was presented to council about 3 years ago that actually identified several areas along the Macquarie River and some along the Bell that needed to be addressed in the short term because there was some severe erosion. That was one of them that you're talking about there at the Duke of Wellington. There's another one in Dubbo near the Track-O'Reilly pedestrian bridge on Tamworth Street, and there's already been some of that riverbank that's fallen away. At this stage, what we're doing is we're going through and getting some engineering assessments done. It appears the initial assessments are that the Duke of Wellington Bridge itself is solid. There's no issue there with the erosion that's occurred. That bridge has been built to a standard that can handle some of the erosion. The biggest issue is on the approach, and we're talking about the approach on the Wellington side of the Duke of Wellington, not the Dubbo side of the Duke of Wellington. So on that approach there, the risk is that that riverbank is being severely compromised. It's obviously eroded, and there's a concern, and this is where we're doing some engineering studies at the moment, that that riverbank might fall away further. So although the bridge might be okay, as people are driving down to that bridge, that riverbank might fall away. Obviously, we don't want that happening with people driving cars down there across that. So that is closed at the moment, and it will be closed for some time, Tony, until we can get some engineering back to see whether either A, we leave it as it is and it's safe, or B, we need to look at how to address that to make it safe in terms of some addressing of that particular erosion that's occurring there. Again, the frustrating part is where that's been built, the bridge is okay. It's really the approaches there, and as that water has continued to erode there, that's been an issue. It's the old saying about a stitch in time saves nine. If there had have been an addressing of that problem several years ago when that report was first handed to council, then we wouldn't be in this situation now because the erosion wouldn't have occurred because there was a process to address that erosion. Now the erosion's occurred, it's a much more difficult process to rebuild that riverbank if that is an option, and I'm not even sure if that is an option. So for the short term and maybe even the medium term, that'll be closed to vehicular access, and we need to be confident that that bridge is going to be safe on the approaches on both sides, but obviously mainly it's the Wellington side that the concern is around.
Yeah, look, one of the other things about this too, Matthew, is, there's an awful lot of water going down the river there at the moment, but the park on the other side, I think a lot of people would like to see that opened up to public access again for walking and that sort of thing, because there is a sort of a loop walk around that park along the river, not along the river, but back from the river. There's a whole park area which extends well back from the river. Wouldn't make much difference at the moment with the water levels, but once they go down, I think would be good to be able to see if the access for, at least for pedestrians, would be opened up again there.
Yeah, and it certainly has impacted pedestrian traffic around Wellington. Obviously, we've got a wonderful new pedestrian bridge across the Bell, linking Cameron Park and Pioneer Park, but obviously that's been cut off at various stages, not the bridge itself, but the access to that. So it is a frustrating time with the amount of water that's come down and still coming down, Tony, and probably will do till December. Yeah,
that's right. And look, just this weekend, they're predicting a lot more water to come down the Bell in the form of a flood, and that will no doubt just do more damage. So we've got more to look forward to there in relation to the bell. Now, moving along, there's one thing you're looking at in Dubbo, which is I find quite interesting and fairly topical too, and that is a scheme to look at e-scooters as a means of transport around the city. Now, I can tell you that just around Wellington, e-scooters have been creating hazards for pedestrians and for traffic. So obviously, this is a subject that needs to be examined fairly carefully. You're looking at running a trial. Currently, e-scooters are not legal. As a matter of fact, the fine's pretty steep for riding an e-scooter along the footpath or the road. I think it's about $780 for everybody, whether you're just a kid or a grandmother. So pretty severe. So just tell us a little bit more about what the plans are there.
So the interesting part there is you are spot on. The e-scooters are illegal at the moment in the state of New South Wales. I don't actually know what the fine is, I apologise, and it's something that the state government would be issuing those fines rather than councils, but it's something that you do see e-scooters, either privately owned e-scooters or ride-share e-scooters are available in various parts of the world, and I've ridden them in various parts. I was only in Darwin a few months ago, riding them around there. I've been in Hobart recently, riding them around there. So they're available in lots of other places. The New South Wales government came out with a concept to say, if you're interested in an e-scooter trial in your city, let us know. And so we said, sure, we'd like to be considered as part of this trial. And I've been a bit frustrated and disappointed with the actual process, Tony, and that's where we got to with our standing committee meetings this week, where we've resolved that at that particular meeting to go down a certain path, which I'll get to in a moment. But the trial was, please tell us about it. Tell us that you're interested in it, which we did tell the state government. And in fact, I was at a function a few months ago where Rob Stokes, the responsible minister, was there talking about e-scooters and actually showing off a number of e-scooters. And so the logic was we apply to the New South Wales government for a trial. Once they say yes to us, then we'd go out to an e-scooter company and say, we've got permission from the government to do this. Which company is the best one to look at? And meanwhile, we'll also go out and consult with the community to make sure that they're okay with us being part of this trial, because there was no point going to the community before we got permission from the state government to be part of the trial. Why put the cart before the horse as such? So that was, from our perspective, an important part of the process to actually look at that and go through that correct process. Now, we were waiting for the government to come back and say whether or not we'd been approved, because we were applying just around our Tracker Riley cycleway around our river in Dubbo. The trial was talking about putting e-scooters on every bit of road that had a 50 kilometre or less speed limit, but we didn't want to introduce them through the streets of Dubbo and Wellington initially. We wanted to trial them in an area that was a very safe, very controlled area where we thought it would be a good chance to test them out. And again, our Tracker Riley cycleway now has people running, has people riding bikes, and these e-scooters on that track would be limited to 10 kilometres an hour, and this is part of the government legislation they were putting together. So I know there are people out there who run faster than 10 kilometres an hour, Tony, so 10 kilometres an hour was quite a reasonable speed, and we thought that would be a great way to link it to the zoo. We're having some discussion with the zoo. What we then found out from the state government was that we had to go and do a deal with an e-scooter company and then have that as part of our new application, which seemed a bit backward because, and I said to Rob Stokes, why would we go and partner up with an e-scooter company before we knew if we were even going to be accepted into a trial? It seemed like we were doing a lot of work for really no net outcome. So anyway, that was the process. So we had to do that. So we analysed some of the companies. We put together a deal with one of those companies and said, right, now we'll go forward to the government. Please give us a go at this trial. Here's the company we'll use. Once you give us permission, then we'll go out and ask our community whether they in fact want this trial or not. And then the government said, oh, we've now introduced a new deadline. We want to have this all up and running by January, so you have to commit to that if you're going to be part of that. And we said, we can't do that because that does not give us enough time to do correct community consultation on this process. So what we actually resolved, and this is a recommendation from the committee on Thursday night to go forward to our council meetings in 2 weeks' time, what we resolved from that recommendation was to officially withdraw from the trial as the state government has laid it out, but then go back to the state government and say, we still want to be considered for a trial, but we would like to do it in our time frame with our parameters being not 50 kilometre an hour roads, just being our Track O'Reilly cycleway, and then progress forward from there. So if that's formally resolved by council at Thursday week's council meeting, then we'll go back to the state government. So effectively, we'll withdraw from the process and we'll go down a path that we think is more suitable, taking a little bit of extra time to do it rather than rushing it. And it all seems a bit rushed. And if I was cynical, Tony, and of course I'm not, but if I was cynical, I would say that maybe there's an election in March and they wanted to have something up and going before then. But that would be only if I was cynical, so I won't go down that path. What we also want to do, Tony, is look at the potential trial of some e-bikes in Dubbo, and we think that's got a lot of potential as well. And again, there are push bikes used around Track O'Reilly at the moment. Now, I actually think...
And they're legal. Well, if they're pedelecs, they're legal.
Yeah, that's right. So people ride e-bikes around now. I know I race mountain bikes, and there are guys who race mountain bikes against us with their e-bikes, and I think they're a fantastic way of being on a good form of transport if you want to use that as a form of transport. I think it's a great way to increase the ability for you to ride further distances and maybe a little bit faster. But the e-scooter concept, I think, would be good for our tourism, in particular around that Track O'Reilly, and in particular if we can do a deal with the zoo where people could use those e-scooters around the zoo. That'd be a separate piece of work we'd have to do there. But I think from a tourism perspective, one of the things that Dubbo has got going for it is we get 300,000 visitors a year to the zoo. One of our great challenges in Dubbo tourism is to hold on to those people for as long as possible. If we give them more activities to do, so we can say, go and visit the Wellington Caves, go and visit the Old Dubbo Jail, go and visit the Royal Flying Doctor Tourism Centre or Visitor Experience Centre. So we've got these different things to do. The more things we can add to that, Tony, the more chance we have of keeping them here for a bit longer. And obviously that means more money injected into the economy, more nights they might stay here. And I don't think people are going to travel from afar just to ride an e-scooter around our Track O'Reilly cycleway. But once they're here to see the zoo, I think there's a good chance that they might take advantage of that. And again, that might only be a few hours. They might do that and have a ride of them and have some fun and experience that. But that might be enough time to keep them here for an extra night. And then they're here for an extra day. They spend some money at another cafe for breakfast the next morning or another night in a motel. So that's really the challenge that council has in front of us, to make sure we try and keep people here as long as possible.
Well, thanks for your time, Matthew. We've been talking to Matthew Dickerson, the Mayor of Dubbo Regional Council. We thank him very much for that. And now it's back to all the great music and entertainment on Binjang 91.5.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for your time on Binjang.
Well, it's always a pleasure, as you know, Matthew. So thank you very much.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.